The pen was gold. Steve noticed it immediately when the lawyer slid it across the mahogany table. Expensive. Heavy. The kind of pen that was designed to make signing important documents feel momentous. He didn't touch it. The office was on the 14th floor of a building in Century City. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Los Angeles. The kind of view that was supposed to remind you how far you'd come. How much you had to lose. It was March 1971. Tuesday afternoon. The light coming through the windows was white and harsh, making everyone in the room look older than they were. Steve was 41. The lawyer's name was Richard. Or Robert. Steve couldn't remember. He'd met the man once before, maybe twice. Clean-shaven, wire-rimmed glasses, a tie that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. Across from Steve sat three men in nearly identical gray suits. Studio executives. One of them, the one in the middle with silver hair and a face like granite, was named Harrison. He'd called this meeting, said it was urgent, said it couldn't wait. Neil sat next to Steve. His wife, or soon-to-be ex-wife. The papers weren't filed yet, but they both knew it was coming. She wore a cream-colored dress. Her hands were folded in her lap. She wasn't looking at Steve. Hadn't looked at him since they'd walked in 15 minutes ago. "Mr. McQueen," Harrison said. His voice was smooth, practiced, the voice of a man who'd convinced people to do things they didn't want to do for 30 years. "We appreciate you coming in today." Steve didn't respond. Harrison glanced at the other executives, then back at Steve. "As you know, Le Mans has put us in a difficult position. The production went significantly over budget. We've been more than patient, more than accommodating. But we're now at a point where decisions need to be made." Steve looked out the window. A plane was passing overhead, silent from this distance, leaving a white trail across the blue sky. "The film isn't performing the way we'd hoped," Harrison continued. "We've had it in limited release for 2 weeks. The numbers aren't good. Frankly, they're catastrophic." One of the other executives, younger, nervous, opened a folder. Started reading numbers, box office figures, projected losses, words like hemorrhaging and unsustainable and liability. Steve stopped listening. He thought about the film, about the 6 months he'd spent in France, about standing on the track at Le Mans, surrounded by the sound of engines, feeling more alive than he'd felt in years, about the way the light hit the cars at dawn, about the perfect, brutal simplicity of speed. He thought about the script he'd thrown away, the traditional narrative the studio wanted. Boy meets girl, character arc, 3-act structure. All the bullshit that would have made it just another movie about racing instead of a film that was racing. "Which brings us to why we're here today," Harrison was saying. He nodded to the lawyer. The lawyer pulled out a document. 20 pages, maybe more. He placed it in front of Steve. "This is a release," the lawyer said. "It absolves you of financial responsibility for the film's losses. In exchange, you agree to relinquish creative control of the final cut and any future distribution decisions." Steve looked at the document. Didn't pick it up. "We need your signature," Harrison said. The room went quiet. Steve could hear the air conditioning, a low hum that filled the silence. He could hear someone's watch ticking, could hear Neely breathing beside him, shallow and careful. "No," Steve said. Harrison blinked. "I'm sorry?" "I said no." "Mr. McQueen, I don't think you understand what's at stake here. If you don't sign this, you'll be personally liable for—" "I know what I'll be liable for. We're talking millions of dollars. Your house, your cars, everything you've built." Steve turned to look at Harrison, really looked at him. At the man's perfect hair and perfect suit and perfect life built on other people's compromises. "I made that film the way it needed to be made," Steve said. His voice was quiet, flat. "Every decision I made was the right one. The fact that it's not making money doesn't change that." The fact that it's not making money is the only thing that matters. Not to me. One of the other executives leaned forward. Steve, be reasonable. You can't afford to take this hit. Nobody can. Sign the paper, walk away, make another movie. One that actually… That actually what? Steve interrupted. Makes money? Gives people what they want? Another car chase with a cute girl and a happy ending? Yes, exactly that. Steve looked back out the window. The plane was gone now. Just empty sky. I spent my whole life pretending to be someone I'm not, Steve said. Playing characters, doing stunts for cameras, smiling at people I don't like, saying things I don't mean. Le Mans was the first time I put something real on screen. The first time I wasn't acting. And it's destroying your career, Harrison said. Maybe, but at least it's honest. Neela spoke for the first time. Steve. Her voice was soft, almost pleading. Sign the paper. He turned to her. Her eyes were wet. She'd been crying, or was about to. He couldn't tell which. We can't lose everything, she said. The kids, the house. We can't… We're already losing everything, Neela. Signing this doesn't change that. It changes how we lose it. Does it? She looked away. The lawyer cleared his throat. Mr. McQueen, if I may, I understand this film means a great deal to you, but from a purely practical standpoint, I don't care about practical. You should. Why? So I can end up like you? Sitting in an office pushing papers, convincing people to give up the things that matter? The lawyer's face reddened. He looked at Harrison. Harrison's jaw tightened. Mr. McQueen, Harrison said, his voice harder now. You're being childish. This isn't about art. This isn't about integrity. This is business. And in business, sometimes you have to cut your losses. Then cut them. But you're doing it without my signature. If you walk out of here without signing, we'll sue you for every penny you have. Then sue me. You'll lose. Probably. You'll be bankrupt. Maybe. Your wife will leave you. Steve looked at Neela. She was staring at her hands. She didn't deny it. Yeah, Steve said quietly. She probably will. The room went silent again. Longer this time. The kind of silence that fills up space and pushes against your chest. Finally, Harrison stood up. The other executives followed. The lawyer gathered his papers, the unsigned document still sitting in front of Steve. You're making a mistake, Harrison said. Wouldn't be my first. Harrison walked to the door, stopped, turned back. You know what your problem is, McQueen? You think being difficult makes you an artist. It doesn't. It just makes you difficult. Steve didn't respond. The three executives left. The lawyer followed, closing the door behind him with a soft click. Steve and Neela sat there alone. Outside, the sun was starting to set. The white light turning gold, then orange, painting the city in colors that would be gone in an hour. Why? Neela asked. Her voice was barely audible. Why what? Why can't you just compromise, just once? Why does everything have to be a fight? Steve thought about it. Really thought about it. He wanted to give her an answer that made sense. That would help her understand. But he didn't have one. I don't know, he said finally. I just know that if I sign that paper, I'll spend the rest of my life wondering who I could have been if I hadn't. And what about who you could have been if you had? He didn't answer. Neela stood up, smoothed her dress, picked up her purse. She walked to the door, stopped, didn't turn around. I can't do this anymore, she said. I know. I loved you. I want you to know that. I really did. I know that too. She left. Steve sat there alone in the empty office as the light faded and the city below turned on its lights. Millions of them, like stars that had fallen and gotten stuck. He looked at the gold pen, still sitting there on the table, still waiting. He stood up, left it there, walked out of the building into the evening air. The valet brought his car around, a Porsche 917, one of the cars from the film. He'd bought it after shooting Wrapped, spent money he didn't have on something he didn't need. He got in, started the engine, felt the vibration move through the steering wheel, through his hands, through his entire body. And then he drove. Fast, faster than he should have. Windows down, radio off, just the sound of the engine and the wind and the road disappearing beneath him. He didn't know where he was going, didn't care. He just knew he couldn't stop moving. Because if he stopped, he'd have to think about what he'd just done, what he'd just lost, what came next. So he drove. And somewhere between the office and home, between the person he was supposed to be and the person he actually was, Steve McQueen made peace with the fact that he'd rather lose everything than compromise on the one thing that actually mattered to him, even if no one else understood why. 3 months later, Neil filed for divorce. 6 months later, Steve's house went into foreclosure. A year later, he was working again, doing movies for money, playing characters, smiling at people he didn't like. But Le Mans still existed. Imperfect, uncommercial, honest. And somewhere in Steve's mind, in the part of him that he kept locked away from everyone, that meant something. It meant that once, just once, he'd refused to compromise. He'd refused to sign. And for a man who'd spent his whole life running from who he really was, that refusal was the closest thing to truth he ever found.